My name is Jan Smith, and I am the Executive Director of SOMOS. And if you don't know what SOMOS is, we have two major functions. One is that we have a bookshop where we accept donations of gently used books, and we sell them at a very inexpensive price. And we have thousands and thousands of books because they're donated by the Taos Literate Society. And our bookshop manager, with some help from volunteers, will clean them, sort them, shelve them, so there's an ever-expanding array of new books to choose from. In addition to that, we are a literary organization that has been in SOMOS since 1983. We are going to be celebrating our 40th anniversary this coming year. Thank you. We do an ongoing series of programs. You can check it out at somostaos.org. We, of course, have our annual storytelling festival. This year is the 24th, which means, next year will be the 25th. And we do a 3-day summer writers conference every summer. We have November is Prose Month, which is a celebration of prose writers in synchronous with National Novel Writing Month. We do the same for poets in April, Poetry Month. We have a young writers program where we go into the local middle schools and the high schools for children grades basically 5 through graduation, and find writing mentors for them, as well as send experienced teachers, writing teachers into the classroom to do special projects. And the students also have their very own every other week writing group. And this year is going to be the 30th anniversary of the Young Writers Program, which I'd like to posthumously thank Phyllis Hotch, a board member who passed this a year ago, who started the Young Writers Program 30 years ago. And then, of course, we have continuous amount of readings and workshops and different things going on. So whether you're looking for a book or you would like some support as a writer, stop in and see us. So I want to welcome everyone tonight. It's a very special show, not only because it's live, but because of the tellers that we are very fortunate to have this year. And I want to thank them in advance, as well as the SOMOS volunteers that are helping with the event, and all of the TCA staff who are working to produce the show. I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors. Financial support is always very helpful. And our sponsors for the 2022 Storytelling Festival include Lucy and Dirk Herman, Charlotte Keefe, Anna McCracken, Virginia Wellington Cabot Foundation, Kathleen Fitzgerald, New Mexico Humanities Council, New Mexico Arts, a division of the Department of Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts, Nusenda, Literary Arts Emergency Grant, the Taos Community Foundation, Casa Gallina, and Sid's Food Mart. Let's give them a thank you, applause. So your mistress of ceremonies this evening is someone that last night I was talking at the community storytelling event in Talpa Community Center. I met her for the first time in 2010 when she was on the Taos High School slam poetry team, and she has been slamming it ever since. She was a featured poet at the Elko Cowboy Poetry Conference. I can't remember how long ago that was, but Olivia Romo is, in addition to being a poet, she is a farmer, an agriculturalist, an acequia supporter, and she has a dual degree, bachelor's degree in English and Chicano studies from the University of New Mexico. She's a very recognized spoken word artist and storyteller. And in 2011, she was titled the New Mexico State Slam Poetry Champion. In addition, she was also nominated as a Remarkable Woman of Taos and a Woman to Watch for the 2013 community-wide celebration honoring outstanding Taoseñas. Let's welcome Olivia Romo.
Buenas noches a todos. Welcome to the 24th Annual Taos Storytelling Festival, hosted by SOMOS. My name is Olivia Romo, Taoseña poet and board member, and I am delighted to be your host. Founded 24 years ago, the Taos Storytelling Festival is one of the most impressive storytelling festivals in the West. In 1999, the inaugural festival was held in a tent just across the way here at Kit Carson Park. It was over a 3-day festival and has evolved into a 2-day festival, with the main event being held here at the beautiful Taos Center of the Arts. Before I introduce my storytellers, I want to begin by acknowledging that we are in the homeland of the Red Willow people, the Tiwa-speaking people of Taos and Picuris. This theater stands on the Don Fernando land grant and was once owned by the Hernandez and Mambi families. As visitors and caretakers aquí in Taos, let us take a moment of silence to honor First Peoples, the land, and the cultural legacy of the descendants of this resilient community. Thank you so much. Well, I have the utmost pleasure of inviting one of my incredible friends and comadres to the stage to bless us for our evening. Last night at the Talpa Community Center, we had about 60 participants in the humble, warm community center in Talpa. And we had pozole and chile, and one of our key speakers was Miss Juanita Lavadi. If you are not familiar, Miss Juanita Lavadi is an incredible artist from here in Taos, born and raised, and has been an incredible acequia advocate. Was one of the co-founders of the Taos Valley Acequia Association with her husband, Eduardo, and has continued to be a pillar of culture and leadership in this valley. Her murals are decorated here in this valley, as from the Barra and El Prado to some of our beautiful escuelitas. And so it is my most incredible pleasure to welcome Miss Juanita Lavadi to open our evening. Thank you. Give her a round of applause.
Thank you for the introduction, Olivia. It's a pleasure to be here at this time, and I wasn't quite expecting to do a bendición, but I think my first reading is a bendición of this season. This is a season of the turning of the seasons. The leaves are changing, and the connection from the sunlight and the water during the year, and as it comes from the roots to the tree and the leaves, and it returns now back to the soil with the leaves leaving their summer home with the branches. I want to start this with a little bit of a dedication to a poeta from Taos who passed away just a few weeks ago, Jerry Mondragon. He died September 28th. And for a lot of Taoseños, I don't know if there's any Taoseños sitting here in the audience, I can't see you anyway, but he will always be remembered as a Taos high school athlete. But he went to Albuquerque and became involved in teatro. He was a stage artist and a poeta, and was involved with the slams there in Albuquerque. And So he left us, and so with this, I'm going to do my reading. I am an artist. I am a teacher, but this is all literacy, but my specialty is actually visual literacy, but I hope that my words will create a vision in your head. It's bilingual. Cada cabeza, un mundo. Every head carries a world. Año tras año, de familia, vecinos, comunidades, worlds reclaim their voices in my head. My father transformed acequia evenings with his shovel. Con su punto de pala echaba al agua. Trembling streamlets, chortle drops, saltan, dancing over the earth's surface. Membrane between wet and dry, his thoughts, corrientes volteando, whirling from compuerta gates, laterals, y venitas con sus chorritos, his breath, a prayer, a small rivulet of water flow. I'm home again, in Taos, en casa. Barefoot toes dig into La Loma soil. My grandpa Alfredo ran here, niño descalzo. Con su educación esmeralda, he became a writer, inventor, photographer. His black valise, leather-worn pouch within, letters where I found them, persistentes cartas, uno tras uno. Dear U.S. War Department, where is my son? Sacrificado en Batán. Mis tíos, compañeros abandonados, but no one here knew. Those that returned sufrieron. Stoic silence, leaving pesadilla nightmares behind. Ay, Taos. Tu corazón puñalado con golpes duros y fuertes, llantos, lágrimas, wet hearts, weeping clouds. Grandma, mi gramita linda left us joining ángeles in heaven, entre santos benditos. Nos pidió suspirando, whispering in her last breath, tráeme agua dulce, tráeme agua dulce del río. Above, los montes brillan alrededor with high mountain pastures, alcahui, ancient bristlecone pine, and trembling aspen. Lucid light shimmers, chispeando luz, between shadows dancing on florestial floors. Pululu, poleo, altamisa, and trembling aspen. Crushed green herbs release a purifying scent. Every breath, a prayer, every drink of water, life. Olivia asked me to do some music, so I'm here with my charango, and I'm going to do a song that's appropriate for this time of the year. It's a canción de Oaxaca. Some people call it the national anthem of Oaxaca, and everyone thinks of Dia de los Muertos, but it's a beautiful song with the words that really strike me. So I will sing, enjoy the music. If you don't understand the words, Dios nunca muere. God never dies. Muere el sol en los montes con la luz que agoniza, pues la vida en su prisa nos conduce a morir. No importa saber que voy a tener el mismo final, porque me quedan consuelo en que Dios nunca morirá. Voy a dejar las cosas que amé, la tierra ideal que me vio nacer. Sé que después habrá de gozar la dicha y la paz que en Dios hallaré. Sé que la vida empieza en donde se piensa que la realidad termina. Sé que Dios nunca muere y que se conmueve el que busca su beatitud. Sé que una nueva luz habrá de alcanzar nuestra soledad y que todo aquel que llega a morir empieza a vivir una eternidad. Muere el sol en los montes con la luz que agoniza, pues la vida en su prisa nos conduce a morir. Pero no importa saber que voy a tener el mismo final, porque me quedan consuelo en que Dios nunca morirá. Gracias.
Are we all dreaming now? Our next storyteller this evening is Sarah Juba Addison. She is a national award-winning storyteller and the president of the Storytellers of Las Cruces. She is the daughter of Mississippi sharecroppers and of West African ancestry. She credits her learned art of storytelling from her grandmother, Sarah Jane, a descendant of West African griots who are the storytellers, poets, musicians, and singers of their communities. Addison performs under the name Juba and lives in New Mexico and has since the early 90s, entertaining under the name Juba. And she has been telling stories to families and children's with her fables of historical reimaginings. Juba's most popular works focus on strong women and African-American she-heroes like Kathy Williams, who disguised herself as a man to join the U.S. Army as a Buffalo soldier in the 1860s and served in the American West, and Susie King Taylor, the first Black nurse to serve during the Civil War. Juba is the Viola Davis of warrior women storytellers and embodies the power of women of color and their experience in a contested America. Juba has performed at White Sands National Monument, Fort Seldom, National Story League Convention, Border Book Festivals of New Mexico, and Chamizal Festival in El Paso, Texas. Earlier this year, she won the Oracle Award from the National Storytelling Network, one of 4 recipients of its Regional Service and Leadership Award. Please help me give a warm welcome to Ms. Juba.
Good evening. How's everyone? Good. I follow in the footsteps of my ancestors from West Africa. And before the storyteller is allowed to share her story, she must ask permission. Therefore, I ask permission from Miss Olivia. May I have permission to tell my stories?
Permission granted.
Ashe. Thank you. I am Juba. I am Sarah Juba Addison, great-granddaughter of Sadie, granddaughter of Sarah, daughter of Lillian, heart daughter of Elizabeth, and a breast cancer survivor. We are all survivors in this room. October is Breast Cancer Month. I encourage you to encourage others to make sure they have their mammograms, and also men, make sure you check yourselves. But we have also survived COVID-19. Some of us in this room had COVID-19, and you're here tonight. You are a survivor. Give yourself a hand, and give those who did not make it a hand as well, because they are now our ancestors who are looking down on us. I'm a Toastmaster, and one of the things we do is don't go over our time. Here we go. Tonight I'd like to share a couple stories with you. The first story I'm going to share with you is called Ebony Sea. And this story is based on a true incident that happened off the seacoast of Georgia. I was born in the Mississippi Delta. My parents were sharecroppers. But in this story, this is about some Igbo Africans who made the decision that they did not want to be slaves. And now, Ebony Sea. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariots, coming to carry me home. There was a day like no other day. And there was a time like no other time. But the day I'm referring to is the day they called Ebony Sea. You see, there was a lot of talk about a great ship that was coming across the ocean. Now, they said that this ship had special cargo, human cargo. There was a lot of mixed emotion in the land about this cargo that was coming. You see, the landowners, they were happy because for them, it meant there were men and women who were coming. They would build their barns and their homes, plant and harvest their crops, cook, clean, and raise their babies. But there were others who were not happy at all. They were very sad because they knew that those who were coming would never know the taste of freedom again. And it made them very, very sad. They knew that those who were coming would only know how to work from sun up to sundown. And if they didn't work fast enough or hard enough, they would be beat and even sold. And they knew that those babies that they would carry would never be their babies. They would be property. And oh, this made them so sad. Well, finally, the ship landed. And everyone went down to the seashore to see that magnificent ship. Aunt Liza, she went too. And as she was standing there, She said, "My Lord, this is a most peculiar day." Indeed it was. Because you see, it seemed as if Father Time told Brother Sun to stand still. And he told Sister Wind to stop moving her skirts. The ship is being unloaded. There's a little boy, a little cabin boy. They called him Toby. "Toby, grab that bag, Toby." And he would be running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then finally, it was time for the special cargo. Up from the belly of that ship came men and women black as midnight, Igbo Africans. And as they came out of the belly of the ship, they stood in perfect formation, as if they were waiting for someone. Indeed, they were waiting for someone. They were waiting for their leader. She came up, stood in front of those Africans, turned. She had on a red head wrap. She proceeded to walk off that ship, and as she did, those Africans followed behind her. Aunt Liza was looking at this, and she said, "My Lord, she sure can tote herself. I bet they stole them folks, 'cause she looked like royalty to me." As the Africans walked off the ship and onto the seashore, they stood there. Their leader began to look around. She began to smell the air. She could not smell her village. She could not smell the cooking pots. She looked at those behind her, and they were looking at her. And then she began to think. She thought, where am I? This is a strange land. Where am I? And then she turned her head in the other direction, and she began to think about, I'll never see the love of my life again. And what about my children? And their children, and their children. And then she looked back at those behind her, and they were saying, "You are our leader. We want to go home. You must take us home." And then she began to think about her future. And then she remembered what the elders had told her. You see, our elders told us that when the body dies, the soul returns home. And oh, how they wanted to go home. And she, being their leader, must take them home. And she began to walk into the ocean. And one by one, those Africans, they walked behind her. There was a baby. The baby began to cry, and the mother put it to her breast to suckle. But they kept going. And the little cabin boy, little Toby, he looked up and he saw them, and he started running, and he was screaming, "Please! Oh, please, wait for me! Oh, please!" Aunt Liza, she ran to him, and she grabbed him, and she said, "Yous holds on to me, and I's holds on to you, and together we'll make it in this land of slavery." I stand here as a testament, as every other African American you see who came here through the line of slavery, that indeed we survived in this land of slavery. Swing low, Sweet chariot coming to carry me home. Ashe. There's a children's book that has that story, and the name of the book is written by Irene Smalls, and the book is called Ebony Sea. The illustration in it is wonderful, so I encourage you to read the book. The story won't be like what I told you, though. The next story I'd like to share with you is called A Mother's Love. How many mothers out there tonight? Love your babies? That's right. We love our babies, and we're not going to let nothing and nobody do anything to them, are we? All right. Well, you know it's like that in the animal kingdom also. So this is the story, A Mother's Love. Once upon a time, in a village where my ancestors come from, there was a drop-dead gorgeous, handsome man. Now, when this man was born, the midwife looked at him and said, "There's something special about you." Told his father, "You got something here." And of course, his mother said, "Yes, that's my boy. I love my boy." He was a good hunter. Oh, and the thing about his hunting is that everyone would go out, they bring back 3 or 4, but he'd bring back 10 or 12. He was able to feed the whole village. Well, all the women were in love with him. But one particular one caught his eye, and he decided that that would be the mother of his children, his wife. They got married. They had a wonderful ceremony, and she had 2 boys. Now, those boys looked just like him. They were strong. They cried with such vigor. Well, they needed to have a naming ceremony. And he said, "I'm going to go into the forest, and I'm going to find a leopard cub. That's what I'm going to sacrifice for my son." Okay. Now, in the forest, there was a leopardess. She had twins also. She had 2 beautiful, black as midnight babies, and she loved them. One day, she said, "You stay here hidden. I'm going to go get food." And of course, those cubs were just like our children. What did they do? They were not hidden. They were out frolicking, having a good time, doing what baby leopards do. Now the hunter, remember I told you he was a good hunter. He was supposed to be finding 1 cub. But what did he find? 2. He put them in his bag, and he took them back to the village, put them in the cage, and said, "Tomorrow, I will sacrifice these cubs." When the leopardess returned, she realized her babies were gone. She smelled the scent of the hunter, and she followed it. And she's sitting on the ridge, looking down into the village. And there she saw the fires, and she thought, "My babies are there. I must get my babies." Now, she knew she could not walk into that village as a leopard. She would be attacked. So she changed herself into a woman, and she walked into the village, and she sniffing for her babies. She found them, and she knocked on the door. The hunter pulled the door open and looked at her and said, "How may I help you?" And she says, "I'm traveling, and I was hoping that I could spend the night in your village." Says, "Of course. Come, you can stay with me." She walked in, and he said, "Have a seat." And she sat down. And she sniffed. she smelled her babies. And she says, "What do you have over there?" She says, "Oh, I'm glad you asked. I have 2 leopard cubs. I am going to sacrifice them tomorrow for my sons." She says, "Oh, dear. You are welcome to stay for the feast if you like." She said, "Are you going to sacrifice both of them? I mean, can't you just do one?" He said, "No. I have 2. I'm going to sacrifice 2. She says, "Oh, but what about the mother? What about the leopardess? How do you think she feels?" He says, "I don't care how she feels. All I care about is sacrificing those leopards for my son." She says, "Oh, I beg of you." He stood up and said, "Listen, you are a mere woman, and I have invited you in here as a guest. You're traveling alone. Sit down, or you may leave." She says, "Well, if you put it that way." Then she turned back into her true form, the leopardess, and she attacked him, and she killed him. Then she turned herself back into a woman because she had to get her babies out of the cage. With her nimble fingers, she got them out. In her arms, she carried them until they got outside of the village and up on the hill. There she dropped them, and she turned back into a leopard. And those babies rejoiced to be back with their mother. And she ran off, and they followed her. Now the next morning when the wife came, she wondered what was taking the husband so long. Everything was prepared, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen. She opened the door, and oh, the scream she let out was horrific. But had you been in the forest with the leopardess, you would have heard joy and laughter as she played with her babies. That is a mother's love. Ashe. Thank you for allowing me to share my stories. Continue to enjoy the rest of the storytellers.
Our next storyteller is Cisco Guevara, a local Nuevo Mexicano storytelling legend who has participated in the Taos Storytelling Festival since its inception. He draws his outrageously true stories from his Hispanic and Indian heritage and from his dynamic experience as a river guide over the last quarter century. Named as a Taos Unsung Hero in 2018 as a Rio Grande advocate, he is the owner of Los Rios River Runners, New Mexico's oldest and most experienced rafting company in the Norte. His stories come from his deep connection to the beautiful wild places of New Mexico and his strong connection to his Chicano and Native American culture. Please give it up for my manito and my vecino, Cisco Guevara.
Howdy. Thanks for participating in the Taos Storytelling Festival and getting me out of the house. My name is Francisco Antonio Miguel Nino de Ortiz Ladrón de Guevara. That's why they call me Cisco. I'm of mestizo heritage, which means the European side of my family came to this part of the world and intermarried with the local native population, and we've been around ever since. And when I think about my ancestry, I realize, wow, one part of my family was really mean to another part of my family, and that totally explains all the angst and craziness at family reunions. I didn't know I was a storyteller until the good ladies of SOMOS came to me many years ago and said, Cisco, we're starting a storytelling festival. We want you to come tell a story. And I said, well, I'm very honored, ladies, but I'm not a storyteller. I'm a raft guide. And they said, Cisco, we've been on your raft trips. You're a storyteller. So I remember getting up on the stage that very first time, and oh my God, that was horrifying. You know, fear of public speaking is a big one for human beings, and I had it bad. I mean, I was really petrified. I was so nervous. I was so scared. I kind of remember comparing it to when I'm at the top of the Rock Garden Rapid, which is one of the biggest rapids in the Southwest. I'm scared, but I know exactly what to do and how to put the boat where it needs to be and where to go. But on the stage, I had no idea. I was totally lost. I was very, very nervous. So I went to the ladies and I admitted, wow, I don't know what to tell. And they said, Cisco, it's easy. All you got to do is tell your most memorable day from your raft trips. And I went, oh, well, that's easy. That's those days I found dead bodies down there. So I soon got this reputation for telling these really graphic, gross, gruesome stories about encountering dead bodies. So they realized they had to help me out a little bit, and so they had some professional storytellers mentor me a little bit, and we realized, wow, Cisco, you're what we call an intuitive storyteller. You can't memorize anything, but you have these stories in you because of your wild childhood, the way you make your living in the Rio Grande del Norte, your very close connection to the nature and the wildness of it, and the culture that you've come from and grow up in. You've got a lot of stories in you, and if you can just step out of the way, they'll come out. So that's what I do. But in that process, it was also realized, wow, some of these stories are like unruly children, and they use bad words, and they have poor morals, and they might offend people. So I am required to give an apology beforehand. It's not my intention to offend you. It's my intention to entertain you, educate you, and learn in the process. So if any of the words, actions, morals of these stories does offend you, I apologize beforehand. And please remember that if any of the words, actions, or morals of these stories offend you in any way, it is not the fault of SOMOS or the good people here at the TCA. It's all on me. So I take the energy of what's going on in my life, the energy of the day, the energy of the universe, and the energy of you, the audience, and the stories will come out. The other thing I have to do, when my mom found out that I was getting up on stage and telling stories, and some of them are from my wild, what she called misspent youth, I prefer to call it my wisely invested youth, because if I hadn't have done those really stupid things when I was young, I would have had a career at the Los Alamos National Labs and been stuck in a little cubicle under fluorescent lights. I couldn't get a job there. They wouldn't hire me, so I had to go out and make my living in the wild canyons of northern New Mexico in some of God's greatest, most beautiful canyons. And I'm super glad that that happened. My mom, she died a few years ago. She lived to be 90, and she was a teacher, and she taught us great lessons throughout her life. Very powerful woman. Had 6 kids and had 3 in diapers at the same time. I was the oldest, and I was a really slow learner. So that's why she had 3 in diapers. And those were back in the days when it was cloth diapers with, safety pins. So it was quite the effort. But when she found out that I was maybe telling these stories, she said, "Oh, Cisco, you have to promise me. You need to tell those people that you are a productive member of society, you have a successful business, and you served your time and paid your debt. So now you know." My mom was a very powerful woman and always had profound lessons to teach us. But she got the dementia in her later years. And I remember the first time we realized what was going on in her brain, we were at a family reunion, And she wasn't saying much, and she was sitting across from us, and I was sitting next to some of my brothers and sisters, and she looked over at us with this real quizzical look on her face. She went, "Who are you people?" Oh my God, this is getting bad. And my oldest niece, Megan, was sitting next to her, and she said, "Grandma, those are your children." And she went, "No." And she named off all her brothers and sisters as her children. And then she looked at us, and she looked at my sister Becky, who was sitting next to me. And Becky had spent years and years being the main caretaker of my mom. And she looked at Becky, and she pointed at her, "You're that baby that wasn't born in time for the tax credits." And even on her deathbed, she had tremendously powerful life lessons to give us, right until the very end. A little background, my mom, when she was young, grew up with a young man who was her very best friend, a very charming, handsome young man. His name was Napo. And Napo and my mom hung out and played, and they grew up together. And then when my mom got old enough, it was time to start thinking about dating and marriage and all that good stuff. She had met my father, Pancho, and she couldn't make up her mind, so she went to her dad and said, "Dad, what do you think about Napo?" "Oh, what a fine man. What a gentleman." "And what do you think about Pancho?" So she married Pancho. So there she is on her deathbed. And the last intelligible words that she said that taught us such a great, profound life lesson, this is what she said. "Ay, Napo, Napo, Napo." Thanks, Mom. My family, like most northern New Mexico families, grew up very devout Catholic. I was an altar boy from a very early age, and that's a whole separate set of stories. I am looking for a therapist that can help me get some of those multi-million-dollar memories. But going to Mass every Sunday was required, and we never missed a Sunday. We all went as a family. And during Mass, you have to go to Holy Communion. But to receive Holy Communion, you can't have any sins on your soul. So you have to go to confession, which happens on the previous Saturday. So we used to go to confession as a family, but I had a baseball game, and I couldn't make it with the family, so I had to go later. So my mom dropped me off in the afternoon, and she went to get groceries in the family station wagon, and I was walking down the steps to the church to go to confession, and my friend Anthony popped up. "Hey, Cisco, let's go have a smoke." "Oh, that sounds like a good idea." So we went back and had a smoke, and well, back then it wasn't legal. But now it is. How times change. And so I came back out intending to go into the church, but there was my mom. She'd already done the grocery shopping. I'd been back there longer than I thought. So I ran up there and got in the station wagon full of the groceries for the week. And my mom said, "How was your confession, son?" "Oh, it was great, Mom. Yeah, I had a really good one." So there I am the next morning sitting next to my parents in the church at Sunday morning Mass. Mom, Dad, me, and all my brothers and sisters. And it's time to get up and stand in line and go take Holy Communion. And I'm in the line, I'm walking along, and you have to hold your hands a certain way, and I realized, oh no, I didn't go to confession. I've got sins on my soul. This is bad. This is really, really bad, because we believed, and it's probably true, that if you took Holy Communion with a sin on your soul, the ground would crack open and you'd fall straight into the fires of hell. But what was worse is that if my dad found out, he had a big old leather military belt. He was very judicious in the way he used it, but it still hurt. And I was praying, because, what can you do in that situation? So I was praying, "Oh, please, God, please, please. I promise I'll be good from now on, please." I was praying as hard as a young man of that age could pray. And then I looked up, and there I was, right in front of the priest. And he has the holy chalice with all the blessed hosts. And he picks one up, and he says, I play dominoes better than you play dominoes. Oh, God. And at that moment, he stumbled and he dumped the entire chalice of blessed hosts on my head. I was covered with Holy Communion. He said, "Freeze!" And he called the other priest over, and they did their mumbo jumbo and cleaned me up, and then they said, "You can go." And as I turned, I realized, oh, I didn't have to take Holy Communion. I prayed as hard as a young man could pray to God, and God answered my prayers. Hallelujah, there is a God. In my time as a whitewater raft guide, like all whitewater raft guides, we always wanted to go down the Grand Canyon. Yeah, because that's the big daddy. That's where the biggest rapids that are commercially run in the world are. It's a big, big effort, especially if you don't use motors. It takes at least 18, 20, 22, 24 days to get through the canyon. And then there's many days before and many days after getting there and preparing and unpacking. It's a month-long commitment, so not everybody can do it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience that you should do every year. So we were fortunate enough to draw a permit because it's super hard to get permits. It would take like 10 years on a waiting list. And we got a permit. It was late in the season. It was very late in October. We actually spent Thanksgiving down there in the bottom of the canyon. And when we launched, the ranger told us, "There's not another trip for 5 days after you guys launch." Cool. We're going to have the canyon to ourselves. How special is that? And so we're going along. Several days go by, and we get into a part of the canyon where the sheer sandstone rock walls come down on either side of the river. They go straight up for over 2,000 feet, sheer cliffs. So beautiful, so powerful and profound. Just an amazing place to be. And we come around the corner, and there's a little slot canyon. And we were ready for a break, so we pulled over, very, very tiny little beach, and we pulled the boats up onto the sand. And the little slot canyon, it was fun because you could do the chimneying move where you put your hands on one side and your feet on the other, so you're not walking on the bottom, you're walking on the walls, and you work your way up and work your way down. A lot of fun. We were only gone about 15 or 20 minutes, and we came back down, and the boats were gone. The river levels on the Grand Canyon can fluctuate quite dramatically, as we found out, and the boats were gone. And so, well, what do you do in that situation? Well, you can hike out. No, you can't. Dead-end canyon, sheer walls. There's no way to climb. Well, we'll wait for another boat to come. 5 days with nothing. We had the T-shirts on our back. There was no water. There was no food. Well, what's left? We'll jump in the river and swim downstream till we find our boats. 42-degree water. You'll last about 15 minutes and then succumb to hypothermia. And as the realization that we had made some really stupid decisions that were going to kill us sunk into our little brains, we got desperate. And some of us started to cry as we realized the hopelessness of the situation. There was nothing we could do. But when you're in that situation, you start to pray because that's all you've got. And we prayed so hard and in such earnest. And in the middle of the prayer, we look, and here comes our boats floating back upstream. Our prayers were answered. Wow. And then we realized, oh, they're in a back eddy. When the river flows down through the canyons, a lot of the water seeking the lowest points will curl back, especially on the edges of the river and behind boulders. It actually flows back upstream. And in the Grand Canyon, they measure these back eddies by acres. And this one was so big that it actually went downstream around the corner where we couldn't see and then came back up. And here came the boats. And there were a ways out there, but we were glad to have the chance of swimming in that cold water out to those boats. And we never made that mistake again. Stranded in the Grand Canyon. I love being a raft guide. It's the best job in the world. I get to meet people from all walks of life, from all over the world. And one of my favorite groups of people that come back year after year and have for many decades are scientists from NASA, the astronauts. Astronauts from NASA. They come with us every year because in these northern New Mexico canyons, they can get up close and personal with volcanic rock, volcanism. And it's thought that if they ever get to walk on another world somewhere or even look at pictures and study what these worlds look like, they're probably going to run into volcanism, and they need to know everything they can about lava and related rocks, igneous rocks. And this is a beautiful place to do it because New Mexico has more volcanic sites than any other state in the Union. Thankfully, they're all dormant. And this one group, after going with us, had camped a little bit west of here. And this is in 1975 when they were building and deploying the Voyager satellite, which was designed to go further into space than any man-made thing had ever gone before. It was actually going to leave our solar system. It would actually take many years for it to leave the solar system, and it did. Finally, it left the solar system just about 3 years ago. And on the Voyager satellite, they put a little disk of information in case some alien beings found it, they would be able to look at this disk and see that we're intelligent and learn a little bit about us. So these scientists had the job, and it was kind of a contest between different groups, of putting some extra information on this disk. And on the disk, they already had mathematical formulas and classical music and some art. They even had Vitruvius's, what's his name? Da Vinci. Vitruvius Man, you know, the guy is stretched out like this, because somehow that makes us look smart. And so as they're thinking around their campfire and the sun is going down, they look in the distance, and here comes two lone figures approaching their camp. They thought that was really weird. It's kind of late in the day. And the two lone figures are an elderly Native American gentleman and his young grandson. They were out looking for their lost sheep. And when they saw these weird white guys on their land, they were kind of curious about it too. So they came over, and in the conversation that happened, it was soon realized the old man speaks no English at all, and they would have to use the young kid as an interpreter. And then they got this idea, hey, this guy has such an elegant voice, and he's such a traditional, wise old man. We should get him to say something in his beautiful native tongue. We'll record it, and we'll put it on the disc. Nobody else will have that. We'll win the little contest we're having. And so when they asked him, they started thinking, oh, can this old man in his traditional ways, his traditional knowledge, even fathom what we're talking about? Sending a man-made machine out of the solar system into space, can he even grasp that concept? And he readily said yes, and they were very glad he did, so they set up the recording equipment, and he got up in front of it, and he said, Bipu wave kapo, seshuping, okopin, momentumo, shadowage, taha. Aho. And they turned to the young man expecting translation, and he refused, and they begged and pleaded, but he absolutely refused to do any translation. It took them a while. They had to take the recording down to university, and finally they found a linguist that understood that particular dialect, and she laughed and laughed because what the old man said was, "Greetings, star brothers and star sisters. We wish you well from our world. Watch out for these guys. They'll steal your land."
So before I introduce our last and final storyteller, I will tell you that I had a sneak peek and I got to have lunch with her at the Ranchos Plaza Grill right there in Ranchos. And I've been waiting for months, okay, because during the pandemic, the restaurants were closed, and aquí in Taos, if you don't know, everything closes by 7. So if you don't get your enchilada, it's over. And then you're there aguantando all night, you know, with your panza hurting. So I was so excited when Jan said, hey, we're going to go and we're going to go take Carmen out to eat. I said, well, where are we going? She said, the Ranchos Plaza Grill. I said, I'll be there in like 5 minutes, you know. So I get there, and I said, of course, enchiladas, blue corn, chicken, green chili, the whole spread. And I tell Carmen, these are the best sopapillas in the world. Okay, well, if you don't know me, I've never actually traveled the world, but it's my world. And I said, this is the best fry bread ever, and I swear by it. And I tell you, the most beautiful experience I had was when Miss Carmen opened up the beautiful sopapilla in its warm glory, and she goes, she goes like that, and so she clutches her panza, and she just was so happy. And that was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard anybody make. And let's just say after that moment, I'm her new niece, and she is my tia. And we're going to make arroz con pollo, and we're going to make lots of good northern New Mexican and Cuban food together one day very soon. But on a more serious note, Miss Carmen Agradidi is a Cuban storyteller and author of many children's literature and books. She is actually the author of 12 books for children, including The Library Dragon, The Cheshire Cheese Cat, Martina, the Beautiful Cockroach, and 14 Cows of America, a New York best-time seller. The Rooster Who Would Not Be Quiet, Scholastic Press, was released in 2017, and Rita and Ralph's Rotten Day was published in March 2020. Her personal stories first appeared on NPR's All Things Considered. Funny, insightful, and frequently irrelevant, Dee's narratives are culled from her childhood as a Cuban refugee and in Georgia. She is a host of the 4-time Emmy Award-winning children's program, Love That Book. An award-winning author and storyteller, Dee is also an accomplished lecturer and has been a guest speaker for both TED and TEDx conferences, the Library of Congress, Columbia University, the National Book Festival, and the Kennedy Center, among other distinguished venues. She is a lifelong supporter of the institute she opened of 2016 Art of Book Lecture Series for the Smithsonian Libraries. She is also on the board of the Smithsonian Library and Archives. It is with great pleasure and excitement that I invite Ms. Carmen Agradidi to the stage. Give a warm welcome.
Muchas gracias. Thank you for inviting me. Could we please give this beautiful young niece of mine a wonderful hand? She's done such an extraordinary job. So this little story is about 3 minutes long. It's called The Thief. The thief was brought before the king, and the king sentenced him to death. Maybe he was a terrible king, or maybe he was a good king who'd had a dreadful day, or a bad bunion. We're never to know. But that young man, that young thief, had tried to steal the king's horse, and for that, he had just forfeited his life. Now, in the throne room, there were others, several guards towards the back of the room. There were some noblemen. The king's fool was rolling around, not paying much attention to anything, the way fools do. It's fighting back. At that very moment, when the young man was condemned to death, he thought there has to be a way. Evidently, every human being that's ever been face to face with death thinks there's got to be a way out of this. And he fell on his knees and he dragged himself towards the king, clutching the king's robes, which of course brought the king forward on the throne. Everyone turned to look. A couple of people gasped. Even the king's fool went, ooh, oh. And the young man began to talk as quickly as he could, because when your life is on the line, you better find the best words you have. Your Majesty, oh, Your Majesty, he pleaded. I beg of you, if you would give me 1 year of life. And then he fell back on his heels. Like a supplicant, he put his hands together. 1 year. The king cocked his head. Yes. Now, no one spoke. You did not speak to a king, a princely person, a queen, if you weren't spoken to first. But already this day had been odd. And as everyone watched, the king said, what would you do with this year were I to grant it? Well, Your Majesty, and he began to stand up now, feeling more confident. If you gave me 1 year of life, I would spend that year in the stables, With your horse, Samson? Yes, I know my horse, as do you. Yes. Anyway, I would spend that year, every moment of it, teaching your horse to talk. And that's exactly what happened. There was tittering throughout the courtroom, and then a few people snorted, little shoulders jiggling up and down. The king wasn't laughing. The king was thinking. No, it's a lie. The king was wondering. And if you've ever had an animal that you loved, you've wondered, if it could speak, what would it say? Right? You're laughing because you've thought that, right? And maybe it was a moment of regal conceit, or maybe it was genuine curiosity. But the king looked at the young man and said, very well, I'll give you that year. Don't smile yet. 1 year to this day, and in 1 year, I will go to those stables where you will eat and sleep and live, just as you said. And if I go to Samson and that horse opens its mouth and speaks to me, you can have him. You can write him out of this kingdom a free man. Well, then, the young man was beaming. But if I go to my horse and he does not speak to me, you go to the scaffold. The young man reached for his neck. Guards! And that was it. Take him, go on. Well, 2 of the guards came forward, snatched the young man, one wing and then the other. His feet barely touched the ground as they took him out of the throne room. But one of those guards was about to bust a gut. They were about halfway down that long marbled hall when he grabbed that young man, spun him around and said, you are an idiot. And the young thief just smiled and said, why? Why? Do you see what you've just done? Kid, you are never, ever going to teach that horse to talk. The young man rolled on his heels back and forth, and he said, well, a year's a long time. 5 minutes ago, I was a dead man, and look at me here. Huh? A lot can happen in a year. I could die. The king could die. The horse could die. The horse could talk. The world you see is full of wonders. We must never give in to despair. You have to clap now. See, that's a story right there.
Thank you so much. And that's the Taos Storytelling Festival. Thank you so much. That was delightful. And thank you all for coming and supporting the Taos Storytelling Festival.